Alright, so today, and for about the next week, week and a half, 2 weeks, we are going to discuss probably one of the most controversial yet fun questions that we can do in philosophy. And that topic that we'll be discussing is the topic of God. We will be looking at arguments for the existence of God, and then we will also be focused on the arguments against God. Now, you may be asking, what's the purpose in having these discussions? Why is it a debate between the existence of God and the non-existence of God? Why is that a relevant issue? Well, the answer is pretty simple. The majority of Americans, if not the majority of the people in the world, the best way that they know how to explain the mysteries of the universe, the mysteries of the cosmos, if not the world, is through various religious texts, whether it be you a Muslim, Christian, Jewish, etc. You somehow get the majority of your philosophies in some way or another from the Bible. Now, here's where philosophy comes into play. Philosophy asks, if God was the purpose and or designer of the reality in which we exist, then God, him or herself or itself, deserves to be examined. And if we remember back on the very first day when we discussed Socrates, he said that, the unexamined life is a life not worth living. And more specifically, anything that we human beings can experience, anything that we may have some inspiration about, is subject to philosophical investigation. And so this is why we are going to look at the philosophers who promote the existence of God, and then secondly, we will look at the philosophers who reject that the idea of God may exist. All right? So the philosopher that we need to discuss primarily, as in dealing with the existence of God, is Thomas Aquinas. All right? Just to give you a quick background, Thomas Aquinas was one of the prominent members of the Catholic Church. He is now Saint Thomas Aquinas. However, he was one of the most philosophical priests at the time. He is the one who took Aristotle's argument for an unmoved mover, kind of transformed it, if you will, into a Christian context, and then added some elements of his own. So what we are going to discuss now are the 5 proofs that Thomas Aquinas had put forward to explain, or not to explain, but to prove that God does exist. Alright? So the 5 proofs of St. Thomas Aquinas, I'll read them off 1 through 5, and then I'll tell you in detail what they are. The first proof comes directly from Aristotle, and that is the unmoved mover. Now, the concept behind the unmoved mover that's a little bit different than Aristotle is that if something can potentially exist, then it must become actual for it to really exist. As in, like if I really think that there would be a good movie about, what's the new movie come out, where aliens somehow get at war with battleships. If I have the potency, if that movie has the ability to become an actual movie, then that's where potentiality becomes actual. Or if you want to use a sports metaphor, it's like saying this person has a very high potential to become a good ball player. So that potential becomes actual, much as the first unmoved mover is the one that created the first cause. So the first proof directly comes from Aristotle. You can touch on both if you so choose. The next one is called the uncaused cause. It simply, if you remember the Merovingian, is simply more than cause and effect. As in, you can't have any causes that exist in the universe without something somehow, sorry about that, without something somehow initiating an initial cause. So for B to exist, it had to have been caused by A. If C exists, then A and B is what caused C. You see what I'm saying? That's the cause and effect. Now the third one is what we call the cosmological argument. We will discuss that with more detail around lectures 6 or 7, but briefly, what Aquinas suggested in his cosmological argument was the motto ex nihilo nihil fit, which in English means you can't get something from nothing, right? We live in a universe where there's obviously something. So therefore it must have come from something. It couldn't have come from nothing. Nothing produces nothing, right? So therefore, if we have something, it must have come from something, and that something, according to Aquinas, is God. Alright? So kind of already, 1 through 3 in Aquinas' proofs are generally the same thing. They're essentially saying the same, that for any effect or anything to exist, it must have come from something else. Right? But 4 and 5 are a bit different. They're a little bit more modern, and, well, 5 is more modern, 4 is more philosophical, but either way, number 4 is called the argument from degree. What Aquinas meant here is that if we can think of concepts such as the highest good, the highest idea of love, the highest idea of charity, the highest idea of anything, whatever has the highest degree, that must be God, right? It's like if you were to say, well, ultimate love, no human being can properly harness or tap into a concept of ultimate love. But since we can think about the concept of ultimate love, there must be something that exists that does have the qualities where they can do ultimate love, and that highest form is God, or that highest degree is known as God. So that's the argument from degree. Now, the final argument that he provides is the argument from design. This essentially says that if things look like they've been planned, or if they look like they could have only existed if someone would have been there to create it or design it, then there must have been a designer. So Aquinas, using the tools of Aristotle, was able to look back on animals, vegetation, the weather, and all that kind of stuff, and he says that all of this must have been designed. None of it could have just happened by accident, and therefore, since it's not accident, since there's something, then it must have been designed. And that grand designer is known as God. Alright? So those are the 5 proofs in general. The next video, we are going to discuss how we actually have insight into God's nature.